The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on February 4th, 2025.
It's time now for Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And now, here's your host, the president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, Pam Toonpop. Good morning, Pam. Hey, Pam, how you doing today?
I'm great, Gary. How are you?
I'm doing good. Nice, crisp, cool morning again.
It is. It's very crisp and cool up in Pukalai, but it's bright and the sun is shining there, and I'm driving downtown, and it's looking cloudy your way.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Well, at least from the airport toward the mountains, it's looking, as far as Wednesday, it's looking a little cloudy. But it's a wonderful morning. Thank you so much for all you do for our show. It's always great to talk to you in the morning. And we want to welcome everybody this morning to Business Matters. This is a wonderful Tuesday morning to get started. And today we're going to have two amazing guests. We're going to have Roseann Freitas, the Chief Executive Officer of the Building Industry Association, regarding issues affecting the construction industry. And then we're going to speak to Miles DeCoito. He is a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and he is the sales manager for AirMed Network. And we're going to learn all about AirMed Network this morning. But right now, I'd like to introduce you to Roseann Freitas, the Chief Executive Officer for BIA, the Building Industry Association, because she's going to share what's happening now. And there's some interesting things that are going on that really are going to impact the construction industry, as well as all of those who are, looking to build in these challenging times. Good morning, Roseann, and how are you this morning?
Good morning, Pam. I am actually doing great. Beautiful day over here on Oahu as well.
Oh, so glad to hear it. After all the wind and rain we had last week, it's nice to see beautiful days, but we also appreciate the rain.
Exactly.
So I know that we've been watching, and of course on another industry front, the issue of tariffs coming up have been a big challenge, and of course also a challenge for our visitor industry as well. But they definitely are going to impact the construction industry. Can you share a little bit about what's going on with the tariffs and some of the other challenges the industry is facing?
Thanks, Pam. It has been a challenging couple of weeks, actually, with obviously this week with the tariff announcement and then pulling it back for a short period of time. And then, of course, last week's federal funding freeze that also got pulled. Both of those actually have a huge impact on the construction industry. So we'll start with those tariffs. What a lot of people may not already know is that with the lumber, and most of the lumber is coming from Canada for housing here in the U.S., it already had a tariff on it. So now with the additional one on, it would have taken lumber with about a 40% tariff on top of that. And that cost is going to be held by the consumer, right? They've got to build their home, and that's going to increase that cost. We're in a state nobody can really afford almost anymore. And now we're going to add this cost on top. So I'm glad there's a little break, but I'm really hoping they don't bring in that 25% tariff from Canada. But also Mexico, gypsum, which is used for drywall, that also would have a huge impact because most of that comes from Mexico. So we have to recognize anytime we do any of those tariffs, we add to our bottom line. And already in an industry that can barely afford, and affordable housing is a challenge. So those are the big one, Pam.
It really is. And of course, as everybody said, the president is saying, well, it's going to, what we're going to do is we're going to tax the country, and they're going to be paying the tax. And some people have been hearing that and thinking, okay, well, this is such a great win-win. The money's coming in from somewhere else, not fully understanding that the taxes that you tax, for the businesses that are buying those much-needed supplies that we need now in huge quantities, have to be passed down. The business has to say, okay, I'm going to absorb that tax, the companies that are the tax is imposed on have to recoup it. So then they pass it on to the companies in Maui buying all those materials and supplies. And then they have to pass it on to the customer. And you listen to what's being said, and some people think, people in business realize, okay, this is going to be a huge impact. And now here again, we have to hit our customers with an additional cost at a time when they're struggling. But others who just don't understand the trickle-down effect of this think, oh, well, that sounds like a great idea, not understanding the reality.
Oh, so you hit that nail on the head there, Pam, because a lot of times, especially in construction projects, they're pretty transparent with their cost. Here's what the lumber cost is. So it's not like they're adding on to it for some of them. That some of them will break it down and you're paying the actual costs. And if that's the case, there's nothing anybody can do to absorb that cost. It's going to be what it's going to be. And it just had that negative effect. And, they're saying, well, buy Americans. But the reality is, like, when it comes to lumber, we don't have enough of that in the U.S. to actually build all that we need to build, which is why we source a lot of it from Canada. So it's not even we could do it ourselves. We just don't have that capability.
No, that's very true. And, and the other thing is that as we look to build some more of those capabilities, it is still a challenge because you're seeing across the country challenges with worker shortages. So, it's not like there aren't a number of factors that impact how we can start doing more manufacturing at home. And we all want to see some more manufacturing at home, given some of the challenges we're having on a global scale. But, there's a lot of nuances that people have to take into account. And as you say, contractors are very good at pricing out materials and things and showing their clients what these costs are so that they understand what the costs are for the materials and what the costs are to build.
Exactly. And I think the other thing you hit on there, Pam, was that labor shortage. And so one thing we've been doing with BIA is really working to help reduce some of that for the trades. The trades have had this issue for decades now because we all sent our kids to college and we didn't send to trade school. So we're trying to rectify that. And we've been working with the sitting county here in Honolulu on a state grant, which allows us to provide this education that's paid for to underserved markets. And so we're able to help some younger people and older people just get into the industry and so that they can actually make above average and stay here in Hawaii, because we both know we're losing our younger demographic. But when that came down, the federal freeze, it really put my heart stopped that day. We're in the middle of a month. Yeah. What do we do? And so I'm glad that has been put on hold, that you can't just shut those programs down, because not all federal spending is in this thing, to help people who don't need it or in something you don't believe. A lot of that is done to help the economy and to grow and develop the workforce.
Absolutely. And this is a critical time, especially when we have, at least on Maui, and you can share what it's like statewide, but we have an aging construction industry. So a lot of the members in our industry who have valiantly served us for decades are getting ready to retire. And that means we need new people trained to come into the industry and continue to provide quality work and services.
Exactly. The whole construction industry is aging out. Most of them close to retirement, some of them just holding on because there's really no one to come and step into that place. So the program that we've been doing over here on Oahu, we're working to bring over to Maui and to Big Island, because there's such a need on all of the islands. We need these workers. We need these trained workers. So we're not so reliant on alpha people coming from the mainland to do the jobs, which we appreciate the help, but it would be great to keep the money here in our state. And that helps grow the economy. So it really is understanding we're aging out of the workforce. We need people to come into it. And trades are a great option because you don't have the high cost of a college education. You come in, you make money, and you're making more than a lot of the college graduates will make. So it's a great option.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to share with folks is, in this time, the construction industry was part of our economic saving grace. Right? This is the industry that was helping shore up our economy when other areas like our visitor count are down.
Exactly. Had it not been for construction during the pandemic time period, the economy would have been way worse. And we know it was bad. We saw what happened to the hospitality industry with the shutdown. And we're grateful that we had at least the construction side going well. That helped keep some things moving forward, some people employed while we waited it out with all the shutdowns and the recovery for our tourism industry. Though it's an industry that's always needed. And everybody has something, whether it's building a new home or remodeling or repairing and fixing what they have. So thank goodness it's there because it always continues during the good and bad times. Not that it doesn't have its ups and downs. It does, like any industry. But it was great during the pandemic to have that to rely on because people wanted to uh, make their homes more suitable for working from home.
Yeah, that's very true. And of course, because all the building that we need on Maui, the industry is critically important to us now and for the next decade. So long time, we really need to protect this industry and help people understand the severe impact. And then on top of that, for us, we saw Canada push back on the tariff, which, in a way that was travel. And that impacted Hawaii a great deal, and particularly Maui. We have a lot of Canadian visitors that we love and who frequent Maui on a regular basis. And they were saying, well, with these tariffs, we can't travel.
Exactly. Yeah, and we know what that does when we don't get the foreign traveler. We've seen it with Japan and with the pandemic. We can't afford to lose the Canadian travelers. And if we make it so hard for them to get here, they're not going to come. And you're right, that has a ripple effect on the hospitality side. But once it hit that, it also spreads out, right, into other areas, to your restaurants on Maui and every other business that really relies and leans on the whole economy. It's not like you can take one piece of a sector out and everything continue to function normally. It all goes together.
Yeah, the trickle-down effect is huge. And so it's really important that we understand that and that, again, what we need to help do is reach out to our congressional leaders and reach out, even writing the president and helping him understand the impacts that we have.
So this week, the National Association of Home Builders reached out to the president with a letter stating, don't do this. We will be severely impacted in the construction industry. We won't be able to build, and the cost is just going to go up and up and up.
Yeah, that's, and for us, in Hawaii, with the high cost of shipping to get in added on top of that, and with material shortages and higher prices, it's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem that we're trying to get it so we can have affordable housing, bring down some of that pricing, and it seems like everything coming down just escalates and increases that price, which takes us further away. When we look at the islands and median price houses over $1 million on both Maui and Oahu, that's just not realistic. Most people cannot afford that.
Yeah,
that's very true. We got to deal with it. Yeah.
Very true.
All right, Pam, I have Shaggy waiting to call in whenever you're ready to leave.
Okay, so I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to do a commercial break. And when we come back, Shaggy's going to come in and continue the conversation as I'm on my way to Honolulu and at the airport. So I wish everybody a wonderful day. And Roseann, stay tuned. Shaggy, you'll be right back to see you.
All right, we're back, and now we have Shaggy filling in for Pam. Hey, Shaggy.
Hi, Gary. It's kind of fun to come on here and talk business. Good morning, Roseann.
Good morning.
I thought it was funny that yesterday when I called you for to set up the interview, when Pam called me back, I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing the interview as well. So this is going to be fun. I was listening a little bit.
It's great.
Yeah. It keeps us on our toes, which, it's kind of what it sounds like is happening. I was listening a little earlier with you and Pam and the conversation that was happening. Even though, like, the tariffs have been kind of, pushed down the road, like, what kind of signs do you think that the builders here on Maui are looking for to kind of tell them which way the winds are going to blow?
Well, I think that's a great question because once you get this uncertainty, which is where we're at, you're very cautious making business decisions moving forward because any change could really have that impact. So I think people are going to be cautious. They're still going to do business as usual, but they're most definitely, I think it's going to have a huge impact on the consumer because how do you start a project when it could possibly increase on that percentage level? Because most people who are doing a home, it's not like they have a ton of extra money sitting around to anticipate such a huge increase that's out of their control. So I think really for us as the industry and probably for the US's economy, we need some certainty. These rash in some ways decisions and quick decisions without really the having thought them through and the unintended consequences probably needs to be done not so quickly, not so rash. Sit down, evaluate the situation first before you just put all of these things into place because it may be, okay, we don't have it, but you've already had this impact on people's spending because of it, because we change our habits based on what we're hearing in the economy. And if you anticipate all pricing going up, not just in construction, but in food and everywhere else, you're less likely to spend on some of the fun items, right? Which could have really that unintended consequences for those industries as well.
Yeah, because a lot of people, and this is one of those things as living in the free market world, is a lot of people don't consider the collateral as once your building community starts to have problems getting materials, starts to have problems with finding workers and being able to pay them on time. This can collapse other economies around builders.
Exactly. So what happens if all of this goes up, people stop their projects? Now people in the construction industry have to let their employees go. Well, there's that trickle effect. If they own a home or if they rent a home, they're not able to make those payments. Again, that impacts everybody along that chain. And we have to be very mindful of that. Like for us, when we heard initially that freeze on the federal spending, and especially because we have such a robust plan for 25 on workforce development, I'm in the middle of actually hiring somebody. We're doing the interviews right now, but I had put a stop on that on Monday, the last week Monday, to say, hold it. If this is coming down the pipe, I can't bring anybody else on to do what we do because I need to protect the current staff we have. We're grateful that got, paused, and they will revisit those programs, but it still is in the back of my mind that I need to be mindful to protect the staff I have before bringing anybody else in, because then we're all worried. We're, especially in Hawaii, we're pretty much one paycheck away from almost being homeless, right? It's so expensive to live here.
Right. And the thing that I also kind of wanted to bring up is when your cost of materials go up, it also impacts how much money you have for employees. And going into a big reconstruction period that Maui is going to need to be in for the next 5 to 10 years, being in that reconstructive period, we're going to need a massive workforce. And that workforce is going to have to be, of course, funded and staffed to the level when you go out to a work site that the work can be done quickly as well as safely. When it comes to the rising cost of material, we were already looking at a little bit of a squeeze. So as we're going into the warmer months where we're going to start seeing the uptick in people wanting to start build projects, how is it going to be for employers and having the availability to have enough of a work staff to be able to viably do the work?
Well, I think we're all a little concerned, especially with the major rebuild that needs to be done over on Maui. And of course, all of the islands need more housing. And Pam and I were mentioning how that workforce is aging out. So we're just really working on the campaign to attract that interest. And some of that is getting them the training they need to actually be productive in the field so they can actually help make this happen. And that's where we really rely on additional funding through, your Job Corps type programs that allow people, disadvantaged people, to get those jobs. And that's what we need here. We need people who are here locally, who are going to stay here locally and be part of that workforce, because then the money, one, stays here in Hawaii. We stop losing that younger generation to the mainland. So this is going to be critical, especially as we move forward in rebuilding of Lahaina. There's so many homes that have to be rebuilt. The tariffs are already going to be challenging because, and you guys are very aware on Maui, is those prices of those homes have really increased, and the cost to rebuild them has. And many of those homeowners, while they had insurance, it wasn't enough to cover the cost of rebuilding. And that's for those who did have insurance. So, and the settlements they're getting from other organizations isn't enough to rebuild at today's cost. So now if you add even more on top of that, you just can't really rebuild it. But without a workforce, we can't rebuild to start with. So we need to get the workforce in place locally instead of bringing everyone from the mainland here to do it, because that too increases costs, having to bring them in. But then when they leave, the money goes back with them and doesn't stay in Hawaii.
And how tough is this of an argument to have with aerial youth, where it's, hey, I understand that there's big possibilities out there, but the reward for staying here, the reward for doing this work here is greater. Like, how do you get that message to the younger generation that you need?
And I think that's where the one thing we have here on our side is Hawaii. Not only is it physically beautiful, the people are beautiful in their way, the whole aloha way. And having lived on the mainland myself, it's not the same. It's not the same sense of community we have here in the state of Hawaii. So I think for us, we really have to highlight how important that is. Their families, their sense of aloha, because that's one of those attractions. And that one's not, we don't have to pay for. But the other side, we do have to make the wages so that they can afford to live here. Our cost of housing is so high. Our food, everything is so much higher than anywhere else. And we get it. We're in the middle of nowhere. But the reality, shipping costs are killing us. And if there was a way we could also bring some of that down. So we've made some of that harder with logistics, but then we have regulations. And that's another factor that really is driving the cost of building homes here in Hawaii, is we are a highly regulated state. And some of this regulation is great. We want safety. We're all about safety. But sometimes certain things that come in aren't necessarily safety related as much as maybe a special interest group in their product. And we have to be careful with that, because all of that adds on to the cost of building here in Hawaii.
Yeah, and the thing is too is, like, it's already kind of a fragile situation, and hilariously, I've heard it described as a octopus with knives. It doesn't matter how you try to approach the problem, something has to get cut before it can get solved. Right. So, I mean, between the squeeze that you guys experience, between the diminishing workforce, the rise in cost and everything, is there ever a time where you really have to kind of go out and act like a cheerleader, just to kind of be like, okay, it's rough now, it's going to be a little rough ahead, but we this is a team effort that we really are invested in for many different reasons?
And yes, and we do. We have to share that story with people about, yeah, we can do this. But it's really also sharing that we all need to come together. And so collectively sit down with all the parties involved to have that conversation. There, you're right. Something has to be cut. There's no way to get around that. I mean, just business practices. If your revenue, you have to look not just increasing your revenue, you also have to look at, reducing the expenses that aren't needed. So, or maybe they are needed, but they're not what you can afford at this point. So it's going to take, I think, the entire community. The one thing with the construction industry, especially with that aging out demographic, they went through the recession. They've been through some tough times in the industry, so they understand the ups and downs of it. It's just now attracting in that younger generation to be willing to go through some of those ups and downs and ride it, sometimes when it feels really uncomfortable and it's kind of scary.
And the thing is, it's like, with all that uncertainty, it's kind of hard because the one fun thing of markets is how fragile they are when it comes to areas of uncertainty. With all of the uncertainty that right now is happening, what are some of the few stable things that people can look to and be like, oh, okay, so maybe it's not so chaotic. Maybe these indicators will kind of help us determine the way forward.
Well, I think some of that is sometimes we get caught up in the hype of the story, right? Some of it is done to make a point or to, I mean, if we look at what's happened with both the tariffs and with the federal funding, it got a lot of traction, it got a lot of attention, people got worried. But at the end, they had to step back and say, okay, we got to reevaluate it. So the best thing we can do is just get up every day, keep doing what we're doing, and not necessarily always react and knee jerk. When we had the recession, some people pulled all of their money out of the stock market, which was pretty not really a great move because you could wait it out. And some of it, we have to be patient and wait it out. But we also have to be proactive to continue moving forward. And that's what we're doing with our workforce development. We know the funding's coming. We're pushing forward. But here's the other thing. We're also looking for other opportunities and other funding outside of the federal government. Because if we can't trust them to help us get this workforce developed, then we'll find other foundations who really want to support those who are underserved, those who need a job, and especially to keep people here in Hawaii in an industry that's so needed. So we have to think a little outside of the box too, and look for other maybe revenue streams or other ways to cut expenses.
So, no small task that is ahead of everybody. But I imagine, though.
Pardon?
I'm sorry. I said I would imagine, though, at this point of the game, like with so many years of, let's just say the last dozen or so years have kind of been up and down. With so much years of experience, you probably also have some of those hardened people that are like, no, we're in this for the long haul as well. How, like, when it comes to all of the resources between the people, between, just the knowledge base and stuff, the things that are called soft needs, how in the building community, besides outreach to younger generations, can they like retain more people through better wages? Like, how can you retain what you have now? You get these new influx.
Correct. And so one thing in construction industry here, it actually pays very well. Of course, I can't say across the board, right? There will be those companies that may not pay as high, but I do know a lot of them pay a very decent wage. But money does matter. So you need to make sure your people can put a roof over their head and feed their families. So if they're worried about that, they're not going to be as productive in the field. They're probably not going to be as loyal. So making sure your employees feel comfortable that they can do that. But also on the flip side is the culture of the company. And we have to recognize it has changed. The workforce 50 years ago is different than the workforce today. And I know, having been myself and some of the older demographic there, it's easy for us to say, well, we worked all those hours. But the reality is we didn't necessarily always spend a lot of time with our families. And so this generation is really asking for more of that balance. And so we as employers need to be mindful and respectful of, yes, we have a job to do, but they also have a family. And so I think some of it is wages, benefits, but some of it's the culture and understanding and meeting them where they're at and really working on that work-life balance, because if they're happy at home, they're going to be a lot happier at work.
Yeah. And the thing is happy worker, more productive worker, like you said. One of the last things I do want to ask you, though, is like, as far as the next coming months, because this is where we're going to start to see a ramp up of projects, as we do every year. It seasonally starts to get a lot busier. What are, without the tariffs, without the workforce, what are some of the side challenges that business in the construction industry are going to have to address going forward?
So some of it is still the same as we've had, and which is really twofold. One is the regulations that come down and constantly changing, and the other is our permitting processes. So compared to any of their counterparts on the mainland, our permitting process is very broken. Even though they're trying to rectify it, it's just not fast enough. So on the mainland, you can get a permit in, a shortcut period of time. But here, it's not that way. And that really is probably the other side. Given the tariffs in the workforce, we need to be able to make that faster, because the longer it takes to get permits, the harder it is to do business. They can't keep building and keeping their businesses and momentum moving forward. So if we can deal with the permitting process, and also when we bring down all of these new regulations, really go through them and make sure they make sense for the state of Hawaii, because a lot of codes, especially when it comes to building, are based on companies that have 4 seasons and we don't.
So I'm so sorry I got cut off there, Roseann, but thank you so much for your time this morning. I know that we got you here right at the last minute. I definitely appreciate you making the time. If anybody has like need of your expertise or to find out more about you, where do they go?
Okay, our website is probably the best source, and that's BIA Hawaii, and Hawaii is all spelled out, .org. So BIAHawaii.org.
Thank you so much for making time for us today. And seriously, we will be checking back in with you as the year goes on and construction needs change.
Thank you so much, Shaggy.
And thanks, for Gary there. I had a little bit of a slip and had to have Gary call me back. But we're going to get ready for our next guest here on Business Matters. Before we do, kind of would like to go over some of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's big plans. Because coming up next is going to be their Hawaiian Airlines luncheon. This is happening at Fuego. It's happening February 21st. I'm just going to say, if you've never been to Fuego before, it is a culinary treat for the tongue, as well as a great place to kind of enjoy the air, enjoy the sight of not only Haleakala, but you can actually see the West Maui Mountains from there too. So February 21st, you'll be able to hear from Hawaiian Airlines CEO Joe Sprague. He's going to talk about what Hawaiian Airlines, that at their recent merger with Alaska Airlines and all the things that they have in store, their new programs, travel incentive, things like that. You can get your tickets in advance. Just go to MauiChamber.com. Now, that's going to be February. In March, the 29th, over at the Grand Wailea, it's going to have the Biz Mix Maui, blowout. I don't know how to explain it. It's where the Maui Chamber and various business support programs all come together. And this year, it's kind of got a really awesome theme. It's going to be Vintage Aloha. So get ready for March 29th to come out, kind of mix it up with the biz, as it were, with the Biz Mix Maui. Sponsorships and tickets, if you'd like to buy those, very easy to do. You can do that at MauiChamber.com. And for any information about what the chamber has going on, go to MauiChamber.com. Gary, I take it we're going to be contacting Miles here shortly.
We have him on the line right now.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let me introduce our next guest, everybody. This is Miles. He is with Air Med Care Network. They're a membership plan for Hawaii Life Flight. This is the state's emergency medevac provider. If you've ever had family members that have needed to be evacuated from one island to another, probably have run into them. They provide their medevac flights with no out-of-pocket expenses, and Miles works with employers to provide their membership to employees at discounted rates. Now, ultimately, the goal is to help Hawaii households protect their families and finances. Not an easy job. So please welcome Miles. Good morning, Miles.
Hey, good morning, Shaggy. That was an incredible introduction. I don't know what I have to say after that. That pretty much takes care of exactly what we do.
Well, it's one of those things when we say medevac, but explaining all of the things that goes to medically transporting a person. That's kind of where I want to start, because it is something when you have a loved one that has emergency medical needs or that has long-term care needs that aren't going to be provided where you're at. It is very worrying and almost soul crushing when you see the cost of this transportation. So before we talk about the cost, what kind of cares and concerns do you guys address when it comes from going from facility to facility for the patient?
I hear you. The first thing I want to do is really lift up our first responders. They're the real heroes. Whether it's our crews that get there first on the ground, like with American Medical Response, but typically it's going to be our county first responders. It's going to be fire, our EMTs, our police officers, and that's really the key into getting aid. Whether it's an accident, whether it is, as you're saying, the long-term illness, maybe an elderly, a kapuna member of the family. The key to getting aid is calling 911, making sure that we're not stubborn and saying, hey, we can do this, we can take care of it. Call 911 and really let the heroes, our first responders, do what they're trained to do what they do best, and that's take care of people in our times of need. And so, if we're thinking about what triggers that response, it's exactly what I just said. It's calling 911, getting the help that you need. Maybe you're already inbound and you're in a vehicle and you're getting to the emergency room, calling 911, letting them know, hey, we're coming in. Let that dispatch personnel talk through what's going on so that they can prepare even ahead of time if a medevac transport is deemed necessary. It doesn't always have to be a provider at the emergency room situation or in trauma where that provider is going to say, hey, this patient needs to be stabilized, we're going to medevac. It could be determined earlier in the dispatching process. And so that's why that communication, calling 911 is so critical.
So this is the thing too, is because a lot of people don't consider when you buy your medical insurance does cover treatments. It covers treatments at facilities. It does not necessarily cover the transport to those facilities. So, I mean, if you're somebody that is looking at a service like Air Medcare Network, like what are some of the questions that people usually have when they approach you? Like as far as the employers wanting to go to their members with your benefits?
Yeah, from an employer's point of view, it can be such a challenging thing to navigate the types of commercial insurance that are being provided to employees. The plans can be very nuanced in terms of, co-payments, deductible, the out-of-pocket maximum. I won't get into all those details because that's why, a plan, the information can be, 40 plus pages long. There's a lot of dense information in there. And I think the simplest thing from my part that I like to just simplify it, whether we're dealing with a household who's looking at membership or an employer, or even could be like a church group or a cycling club. Whoever's looking at our membership, I just say, hey, the simplest thing as I can tell you is, when you have to take a medevac flight, depending upon what kind of insurance you have, the cost could be as little as, something you think is manageable all the way up to the whole bill, and that's the reality. And that, and in all the way in between is a significant amount. It could be quite substantial. And so to simplify that, for the cost of our membership, where if we're just serving a household and it's not something you have available to your employer, it's $99 a year. If you're a kupuna, if you're 60 years or older, $79 a year is what it starts off at. And in Hawaii, you can actually buy membership in incremental amounts where you get an increased savings if you buy it for 3, 5, or even 10 years, and you get a additional discount if you buy it in longer term increments. But it's such a great value. There's no other way I can guarantee somebody and say, hey, if you fly a medevac service in Hawaii, if you pay this $99 a year, I can assure you that you're not going to have any out of pocket expense for that medevac flight for you or anybody in your household, because our plan covers everyone in the household. Regardless of how they're related, in that physical address, everyone will be covered, and we can put them on that membership. So it could be a non-traditional household where you have additional family members, maybe mom and dad have moved in for you to take care of them. We even cover the dependents who are away at college. You can still list them, and they're still covered because we're not just in Hawaii. In Hawaii, we're the only provider through Hawaii Life Flight, but we're also on the continent, on the mainland. We're in 38 other states across 320 plus locations. So, that's a great value where we can not just cover people, whether they're related to you, but if you're there at your physical residence, our membership allows you to list all those people as part of your plan.
And one of the things too that you just brought up is how there's different concerns, or should I say, there's different areas of, as an individual, you would concern yourself of considering how likely it is that you're going to need air medical evacuation to another facility. And because we do have such an uneven distribution of healthcare across the island, I want to ask, with all the new population and all the new projects and things that have formed, have you seen an increase in demand for air transport between islands for medical reasons?
It's exactly what you said in terms of the distribution of where our higher tier facilities are. We're flying people every day. There's no way I can guarantee somebody, hey, you're not going to take a flight. We don't know. I don't know if I'm going to take a flight. I don't know if somebody in my family is going to take a flight today, but I can tell you this. We fly people every day. And so the reason we have to fly them is because the medical care that is needed is not available on the neighbor islands in the case where we fly someone. We're getting people to Queens. We're getting people to Kapi'olani. We're getting people to Straub if it's a burn situation. And so we'd love to be able to take care of people on our neighbor islands. And I know that there are all kinds of efforts on our different islands, our different neighbor islands, to increase the level of care that's available, whether that's through increasing the amount of telemetry that's available, trying to retain providers that can provide higher trauma level care, seeing if we can develop new cardiovascular units. Reality is we're just not there yet. The demand is there. The growing population is pushing the envelope in terms of the need of these types of care on our neighbor islands, but we're not there yet. The reality is we're still going to need to fly people for the foreseeable future. And, like I said, I can't guarantee that you'll ever need a flight, but I do know that we fly people every day, and I just feel better if I could take care of somebody pre-need so that we can get that protection in place ahead of time.
Now, I have to ask, because this is a service that, you go out and you offer to employers to offer to their employees. How does a typical conversation go? Like when you sit down with a company, what are some of the first things they ask you?
Of course, I think the first thing, the reality is, and I put on my business owner's cap, my employer's cap, or maybe just even that person in HR who have to, balance out everything that has to do with benefit versus expense. And that latter word, expense, is, I think the first thing that if I'm a business owner, that's top of mind, like, okay, can we afford this? And so my kuleana, my responsibility, I take it as, relaying to them, I get it. I get that it's an expense. But if I can put a price tag on, just the peace of mind and the protection of your employees, as far as being prepared ahead of time, if the need should arise that they need to pay for a medevac flight, that's where I come in, is conveying, I get that it's an expense. And before I even start talking about how we can bring down the costs just based upon, the number of employees that they have and how that, relates to the discounts that we can offer. But it's really just conveying the value. It doesn't matter, how we can work on price if the value isn't seen. And so I take that as that first kind of foray into that conversation. And I think people get it. I know that purse strings, we've got to manage them, not just in our households, but especially if you're a business owner, especially if you're that employer. But I think people get it. They get that, especially being on the neighbor island, people get the value. And it's just kind of sitting in that conversation and navigating that and seeing how we can figure that out.
Well, I mean, considering that, like you said, the cost of the membership, multi-year, is really affordable, and year to year, it's just kind of a peace of mind to have. But as our population ages, which the last census and stuff that we took here showed Maui County is now a predominant amount of their population over the age of 35. As our population ages, what are going to be some of the challenges for medical transport island to island that you're going to have to face?
Yeah, you're speaking with the demographics, but the numbers are shouting loudly, right? I mean, these numbers really do shout at us. And, even just yesterday, the calls that I get that come in are typically in our 60 and old. But when they come in and they somehow they get a hold of my number, we have a brochure stand somewhere that they saw it. It just happens yesterday. Somebody was at the office of public Parks and Recreation office. I live on the island of Hawaii. I live on the Big Island. So, somebody got a hold of the brochures that we placed at the County of Aging office in the Kona side. And it was, as you said, somebody who's in their 60s. He and his wife are in their 60s, and they're just thinking about the reality of needing to take a life flight. And so on the end of just logistics, and that's not my area. I work in field sales, but on the logistics side, that's where we do have people at Air Medcare Network at Hawaii Life Flight that are planning out infrastructure and, even for like Maui, increasing the number of planes available to the public, to our communities, so that we can fly more people. And that's just a reality. So we are planning for that by having to increase our capacity to fly people, even by bolstering our the number of aircraft that we have.
The thing too is like you have a fleet, you have to maintain that. You have workers that you have to maintain. We all have those challenges, but when it comes to like the sensitive matter of our population and some of the things that we transport island to island, like what is some of the biggest areas that you see people need transport? Is it for long-term care? Is it for emergency care? Is it for like what is kind of the big need that you've been addressing through Hawaii Life Flight?
It's distributed, Shaggy. It's really distributed across accident, trauma, people who have long-term illness where all of a sudden maybe it's that pulmonary edema where they've got fluid in their lungs, something that increases their level of care need, and they've got to be transported, and that might be somebody elderly. So it's really distributed. I don't think there's any one kind of pocket that stands out as far as, are we just transporting car crash victims? Are we transporting the elderly who who are all of a sudden going from stable maybe at an elderly care facility, and now all of a sudden that they're admitted to the hospital, and now they need advanced ICU care. It's really distributed across the board, and the one common factor of why we're transporting those patients is because we don't yet have the facilities and providers that they need on the neighbor islands. The providers they need, the treatment facilities that they need are on Oahu, and that's why we're transporting those patients.
Miles, I have to ask you, because we're getting ready to get here to the end. How can someone get in touch with you to talk about the services and getting their employees these benefits as well?
Yeah, if you're listening on the radio right now and you're trying to think how to get a hold of me, I think the easiest way is I'll just say my phone number out loud, and I'll give you information where you can search me up online. I expect that a lot of your listeners are probably in their morning commute, but you can reach me on my direct line. That's 808-209-0769. I'll say again, it's 808-209-0769. And if you do a search for me and you just go into Google, you can search for me, Miles DiCoito. And my Miles is with a Y, so it's MYLES. And DiCoito is my last name. D like David, E like Echo, B like Charlie, O, I, P like Tom, and then O, Isle de Coito. And you can also just look up Hawaii Life Flight. That might also be one way that is an anchor for you. If you just think Hawaii Life Flight, and you search that up as a Google keyword search, and you're going to find our Life Flight page, and there'll be a way where you can click on your interest to become a member.
All right, Miles, I had to cut you off here. We have to go. Thank you so much for making your time today, though. For everybody, that's it for Business Matters. On behalf of Pamela Tumpop, president of the Maui Chamber, we invite you to tune in again next Tuesday, same time. And it's also rebroadcast on Fridays at noon on Ka'oi. Best wishes and aloha. Ahoy ho.